Hi, this is Jared Crum from Waren Design and Build, and we're going to be going over the operating instructions for the Clevis twister. So we just powered it on, and so the control power is off, as it says on the screen. So now if we pressed an e-stop, it would actually tell you on the screen which e-stop was pressed. So if there's no e-stops pressed, then it will simply say control power off. Now to turn the control power on, you would press the safety reset button, and this blue light would turn on here, letting you know that the control power is on. Now if we press an e-stop again, there's another way to turn the control power on, and that would be in the operator station. You can also hit the reset button on the operator station as long as there's no other e-stops pressed, and that will turn the control power on. So we see that the blue light is on again, the control power is on. So the next thing that we notice, since we just powered up the machine, there's a message that says reference run needed. Press the reference. So you could press that and it would actually run the reference run. Now also, I'm going to open the door just to show you that if we open the door, that message goes away, because you can't do a reference run if the door is open. So if you open the door, it simply just tells you guard door open, and that message goes away. So let's shut the door again. Okay, so the door is shut again, and so we're back to where we were. Reference run needed, press the reference. So I could press this button, but I'm going to show you another way to do a reference run. And that's if you're over here at the control panel and you've just powered up, you can just press the reset button and keep pressing it, and then press the start button. So you press the start button while holding in the reset, and that activates the reference run. So the reference run, the motor's going to move in the clockwise position until it hits the reference switch, and then it's going to come back. So now it knows where it is, and it's going to come back to its home position. So its home position is 117 degrees away from the reference switch. So that's why on the screen here, when you look at its position, it's going to tell you it's at home. So it's at home. That's why it says home right there. It's at home. And home is about 117 degrees. And so if you're twisting a Clevis in the counterclockwise direction, you're going to set a target position that's higher, 200 and something. If you're going to be twisting a Clevis in the clockwise direction, you're going to be setting a target position that's a lower angle, a number that's closer to the reference switch, because the reference switch is 0 degrees. And so if you're going in the clockwise direction, you would have a low number. For instance, what's on the screen now, it says the target position is 9. So that's a low number. That would be twisting in the clockwise direction. And so we have our motor speed down here. It's showing you, so that's how fast the motor will run. That's set in the recipe screen, which we'll get to later. There's, of course, the target position that's set is up here. And then the current recipe is called test product. Well, I think something I should show you is that you do have a tension up button, so we can press that, and we don't have any air pressure right now. So if we did have air pressure, that would move the tension up, and then we press it again, and that would move the tension cylinder back down. So that moves the tension cylinder up and the tension cylinder down manually. You can also manually jog in forward and reverse. So let's jog the motor forward. Now you could only do this while the door is shut. If the door is not shut, it won't let you do any of this. So you could jog the motor forward. You could jog the motor in the reverse direction also. As you see, the motor is being jogged in the reverse direction. So then you can also press this button where it says press to send home, and it will send it home automatically. Okay, so it's sending it home. Let's look now at our recipe selector. And so we see that the arrow on our recipe selector, the blue part on the right, the arrow is pointing to recipe 1. Now if we press the blue enter button right here, it'll highlight recipe 1. So with recipe 1 highlighted, then we could hit the download button and it'll download recipe 1 into the PLC. So now that happened, you see that the current recipe changed to default and the target position changed to 235. So for that recipe 1, it has a description of default and it has a target position of 235. So now you're starting to see how this works. Now if we wanted to go down and select recipe 2, we hit the down arrow, and then to highlight recipe 2, we hit the enter button with the arrow pointing to recipe 2. Now recipe 2 is highlighted. Now if we hit the download button, now it says current recipe counterclockwise. So that has a different description. And the target position is now 212. Okay, let's select recipe 3 and see what that is. Okay, so we go down again, we hit enter, and we hit download. Okay, so recipe 3 was the one that was originally on here when we first powered up the machine. And it has a description of test product, and its target position is 9 degrees. So far recipe 3 is the only one that's actually moving in the clockwise direction. The other 2 were moving in the counterclockwise direction. So let's show you now how to edit the recipe. So we see how to select the recipe. Now let's look at how to edit the recipe. If we press the edit recipe button, okay, now it asks you to log in. So to log in, your user is admin. So it's going to be a little bit harder for me to do this while holding a phone, but ADMIN. So I have to be careful that I don't hit a wrong button. Okay, so the password is first all lowercase with the SAFE, so safe. So S. Now when I press each button, you see that that button turns dark. So that can confirm in your mind when you see that you press the right button. So when I press this F, see the F button turns dark? That lets me know I hit the F correctly. Okay, and then E. And the E button turned dark. Okay, then I'm going to hit the Shift button for a capital T. So we're going to put a capital T, and then the number 1, and then the letter S, and then the letter T. Then we're going to hit the Enter button over here. Okay, so now we're logged in. So let me just show you, once we're logged in, you won't have to log in again as long as you don't log out or power down the machine. So if you hit the close button, you see that there's now a log out button over here, but you can go right back into edit recipes and you could edit the recipes without having to enter that password again. So if you're working with the recipes, you only have to enter that password once, but it will still keep people from changing things if you don't want them changing things. So the recipe selector, which is the blue part on the left, it works the same as on the home page. On the green part on the right, this is the recipe editor. So this is really what we're going to be working with, but you have to start by selecting a recipe. So just like on the home page, select a recipe. So here you would hit the enter button to highlight recipe 1, and then with recipe 1 highlighted, you would press restore to see what's going on there. So now it shows you. So the recipe that you're looking at is recipe 1, and it shows you recipe 1 there in the recipe column, and then in the current column it shows you the actual recipe that's in the PLC now, right? And we know that's the recipe 3 is actually in the PLC now, and it's called test product. So actually we're going to go down and we're going to change recipe 3 instead of changing recipes 1 or 2. So let's go down to recipe 3 and I'll show you how to change a recipe. So I'm going to go down to recipe 3. I'm going to hit, no, in fact, no, let's change recipe 4. How about that? Let's change recipe 4. Okay, so recipe 4, let's hit enter and let's hit restore there. So we did a restore on recipe 4. Okay, so let's change the description of recipe 4. So to change the description of recipe 4, it's set at default. Let's change that to reverse. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hit, you use these arrow keys to move the highlighted parameter in the recipe editor. So with the description highlighted, it's already highlighted, so we could just hit this green enter button and that'll prompt you to be able to change that parameter. So the keyboard kind of minimized for a second accidentally, so I had to hit that other button to make the keyboard show back up. So we're going to rename this reverse. So recipe 4, we'll rename it reverse. Okay, and then we'll hit enter. And then we'll save it. Recipe 4 is now has a description of reverse. Okay, you know what? Now let's go to recipe 5 and let's modify it. So that way we'll have a recipe 5 that's different than a recipe 4. So let's go to, I'm hitting the wrong button. Let's go down to recipe 5. So the arrow is pointing to recipe 5. So now with the arrow pointing to recipe 5, you hit the enter button. Now recipe 5 is highlighted. So with recipe 5 highlighted, we can press restore. Okay, so now this shows recipe 5 over here in the recipe editor. So we're going to change the name of recipe 5, the description. So we're going to hit the green enter button, and this keyboard will come up. And so I want to call recipe 5 clockwise. If you make a mistake, that's the backspace button there. So clockwise. Okay, and then press enter. Okay, and then press save. Okay, so recipe 5 is now has the description of clockwise. Okay, and let's give it a clockwise target now. So let's go down to, well, let's just change the unwind distance just to show how to, you can change that too. So the unwind distance is the distance that it unwinds after it's done twisting the clevis, before it allows you to open up the door to try to get the clevis out. So let's change this. So I hit the green arrow buttons until the unwind distance is selected, and then I'm going to hit the green enter button, and I'll change the unwind distance to 8. There. So now the unwind distance changed to 8, but for that to take effect, you really have to press the save button. So I'll get to press the save button there. So now that's saved. So in recipe 5, the unwind distance is now 8, and we'll do the same thing for the twist target. So let's go down to twist target. Twist target's now selected. We hit the enter button and it'll allow us to change it. Let's change the twist target to 11. Okay, so the twist target is now 11 degrees, and that's a clockwise twist. So let's save that. Okay, so now the one thing I want you to notice now, if you look at the recipe column and the current column, the recipe column is now showing what's in recipe 5. The current column is showing what's downloaded in the PLC, which I believe is recipe 3. So if you want to make them the same, you hit the download button. And now it'll download what's in the current recipe, recipe 5, the one we just had selected. It downloaded that into the PLC. So now what's currently in the PLC is now exactly the same as what's in the recipe 5 that we're now looking at. So that's how you edit the recipes. So now you can hit the close button and go back to the home screen, and now we can select a recipe and run it. So the current recipe is now recipe 5, that it's called clockwise, and it's going to go to the target of 11 degrees. So that's going to be a clockwise twist. So let's actually hit the press to start button, and we'll actually run that recipe. Okay, so it twisted to 11 degrees. It's doing its unwind. Okay, and so now it comes up and it says operator to remove part. So you can open the door as the operator and you can remove the part, and you close the door. Okay, so now you can press this cycle complete button and it will send it back home. And it says completing cycle, and it's sending the motor back home. Okay, so let's select another recipe. So that was a clockwise recipe. Let's select a counterclockwise recipe. So let's select recipe 1. Okay, so I hit the enter button to highlight recipe 1. Now I'm going to hit the download button. That'll download recipe 1. Recipe 1 has a target position of 235. And so I wanted to show you there's another way to start the cycle using the operator station. So with the operator station, you can control the clamp with your open and close. That controls the clamp. You can reset faults from the operator station. It does have an e-stop button, but it also has a start button. So the start button, you can press the start button here and it'll start a cycle. So I'm going to press the start button here and that will start the cycle. And there it is. So it's rotating in the counterclockwise direction. It's doing its unwind. Okay, so its unwind is now done. And then you press the start button for it to come back to its home position. So that's how you can operate this from the operating station.